good evening, or at least, better than spending the night in a medieval hospital. Tonight, let me take you to a place where healing meant bleeding, where incense couldn't hide the smell of death, and where the sick shared beds with rats, strangers, and the plague. Close your eyes if you want. You're feverish, weak, and the only place that might save you is the same place where most go to die. This isn't history from the books. This is the sound of whispered prayers mixed with cries of pain. This is the bed that creaks beneath lice and sweat. This is the terrifying truth of medieval medicine. If you're ready to enter, subscribe to the channel and tell me, where in the world are you watching from tonight? Because what you're about to hear, you won't forget. You step into the ward not as a visitor, but as someone barely clinging to life. And before you see anything, before a single voice reaches your ears, something else hits you first. The spell. It wraps around your face like a wet cloth. A dense, overwhelming mix of blood, sweat, damp, rotting flesh, incense, and urine. The candles flicker near the altar, and the smoke of burning herbs floats in the air, pretending to purify what cannot be masked. It is not medicine you smell. It is a warning. The floor beneath your feet is uneven, cold, and slick from things you would rather not identify. You walk past a row of beds, or what passes for beds. Rough cloth, stained and stiff, stretched over straw. 4 people to a bed, some moaning, some asleep, some no longer either. You feel eyes watching you, hollow and tired, but no one speaks. There are no greetings here, no names exchanged. You lie down because your legs can no longer hold you. The blanket is already in place, damp, cold, stuck to your skin like a second layer of decay. You try not to breathe too deeply. You already know what lives in the air. Near the far wall, there is a small window. It lets in a line of grey light, enough to see the outline of the dead. The bed is always the first to be emptied, not because it is the best place, but because it is the easiest to carry a body out from. You are not in a hospital as we know it today. You are in a space of waiting, a corridor between hope and surrender, a place built not to fight death, but to prepare you. Hospitals in the medieval world were not driven by science. They were acts of faith, houses of prayer disguised as places of healing. Most people came here when all else had failed, when every remedy at home had been tried and every family member had already said goodbye. The presence of monks was more common than that of physicians, and more often than not, the final care you received was a whispered prayer and a candle lit for your soul. There were no charts, no diagnosis, no plans for recovery. If you survived, it was considered divine mercy. If you died, it was considered divine will. Death was not the enemy here. It was part of the structure. It shaped the rhythm of the day, the way people moved, and where patients were placed. Those who looked weak were moved closer to the wall, closer to the exit, closer to the window. Easier that way, for everyone. Even the air felt tired. There was no attempt to ventilate the room. The doors stayed closed. The floors remained sticky. A bucket in the corner collected waste but was rarely emptied in time. And the smell lingered. It crept into your skin. It settled in your nostrils. It became part of your breath. No one spoke of pain relief. There was no concept of sanitation. If someone wiped your forehead, it was with the same cloth used on others. If someone brought you broth, it was more for comfort than nutrition. No one asked if you were getting better. The question never mattered. The goal was not to heal you. It was to give your final days structure, ritual, a sense of order. This is the place where healing smelled like death, where prayer mixed with pus, where the moan of the man beside you was the last sound many ever heard. And in this place, the bed did not offer rest. It offered time, time to think, time to confess, time to wait. And if you lived long enough to feel the sun rise through that small window near your bed, you would wonder not if you had survived, but why. Imagine lying on a rough bench, too weak to move, while a man with stained hands approaches you holding a metal bowl and a knife that has seen to many throats. He is not a doctor. He is your barber. And in the medieval world, that means he is also your surgeon. You are burning with fever. Your skin is flushed. You tremble with every breath. The diagnosis, if one is given, is simple. Your blood is bad, poisoned, imbalanced, and the only way to restore your health is to drain it out of you. This is not a metaphor. They will bleed you until the sickness leaves or your body gives out. The theory behind this is ancient. Medieval medicine clung to the concept of the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health, they believed, was the result of perfect balance between these 4 fluids. Illness came when one overwhelmed the others. And in your case, the blood is to blame. Too much heat in your body, too much red, too much life. So the barber tightens a band around your arm and chooses a vein. There is no anesthesia, no sterile tools, just a blade and habit. He cuts, and the blood comes fast, warm and dark, pouring in the bowl below. Sometimes it is collected in leeches, sometimes in cups, but always it is collected, because taking your blood is not only medicine, it is ritual. The amount removed depends on your symptom. A headache might call for a small cut behind the ear. A fever might need a deeper vein. And if you are truly ill, the bleeding continues until you feel faint. That is a good sign, they believe. That means the poison is leaving. You are told not to eat after the procedure, to rest, to pray. Some patients are bled repeatedly over several days. Some are bled in the neck, the ankles, or the temples. For women, even the menstrual cycle is seen as a form of natural purging. If it stops, bloodletting is recommended to restore balance. The barber surgeon cleans his blade with a cloth already soaked in other people's blood. He wears no gloves. He moves on to the next patient without washing his hands. And still, he is respected, feared, trusted, because if he refuses to bleed you, that means he has already given up. Some barbers carry signs with painted diagrams of the human body, showing where to cut for every ailment. These charts hang beside crosses and candles, medicine and religion, side by side, both believing in the same invisible war. And sometimes, bleeding is not enough. If the illness lingers, they move to cauterization, a hot iron press to the skin to stop the flow or to cleanse the wound. The pain is unimaginable, but it is accepted. Because pain in this world means that the treatment is working. You wonder how many patients died not from their disease, but from the cure itself, from the loss of blood, from the shock, from the infection that follows when your skin is opened again and again. But in these times, no one speaks of infection. No one understands germs. If you worsen, they say your soul is troubled. If you recover, they say your blood is pure once more. The irony is sharp. A body that came in weak now lies paler, colder, drained of its own strength. And yet, you are told to be grateful, because you were given a chance. You were seen. You were treated. In the silence of the night, the bowl of blood sits beside your bed. FLIs gather at its edge, and you wonder if the sickness is truly gone, or if it has simply changed its form, moved from your blood to your mind, from your body to your soul. And still, no one questions the blade. Before a blade ever touched your skin, before a prayer was whispered over your wound, someone looked up at the sky. Not to check the weather, not to ask for a sign, but to consult the stars and the phases of the moon. Because in the medieval hospital, your treatment was not only a matter of symptom, it was a matter of astrology. The belief was simple, yet absolute. The body was a reflection of the heaven. Each organ was ruled by a planet. Each vein was governed by a zodiac sign. And any interference with the body had to align with the cosmos. Otherwise, you risked disaster. A patient with a swollen leg might wait days for the right moon phase. An infected wound would remain untreated if the stars warned against incisions. Surgeons consulted lunar calendars, astrological charts, and planetary alignments before picking up a blade. They were not just physicians, they were stargazers, interpreters of celestial patterns that determined who would live and who would suffer. If the moon was waxing, some believed that blood flowed too freely and that surgeries would lead to deadly hemorrhage. If the moon was in the wrong house, it was said that bones would not heal. A fever during a planetary conjunction was a sign of divine punishment. And if Mars, the planet of war, dominated the sky, bloodletting was seen as reckless. Timing was everything, not because of science, but because of superstition. Patients often carried amulets with symbols of the zodiac, hoping to draw protection. Some hospitals had carvings of stars and moons etched into their stone walls. The wards themselves were aligned to harness cosmic energy. There were even cases where priests were called in not to pray, but to read the stars, to guide the treatment schedule based on the heaven. A woman in labor might be delayed until the moon entered a favorable sign. A man with a festering wound might be sent home with herbs and instructions to return once Venus moved into Taurus. Lives were put on hold. Suffering was prolonged, and all the while, death waited patiently, unaffected by the sky. For the poor, this meant delays that often became death sentences. For the wealthy, it meant treatments tailored to astrological reports written by scholars and monks. But for everyone, it meant that healing was never just about the body. It was about harmony. Not with medicine, but with the cosmos. Imagine lying on a cold surface, trembling from infection, only to be told that today is not the right day to be saved. That your wounds must wait because Saturn has not yet moved. That your pain must deepen because Mercury is in retrograde. And as the moon swells in the sky above, so does your fear. The stars were silent, but their silence held power. Doctors obeyed them without question. The heavens had the final word. not your symptom, not your cries, not your will to survive. And so you waited, beneath candlelight and constellations, hoping the mood would change before your body did, hoping the stars would shift in your favor before the infection spread too far, hoping the sky would offer mercy, even if the world beneath it did not. You are lying still. Your wound burns, festers, and oozes beneath a layer of linen that hasn't been changed in days. The smell is already unbearable, a mix of sweat, rot, and something sour you cannot name. A figure leans over you, dipping their hands into a wooden bowl filled with a thick, dark paste. You think it might be mud at first, but then the smell hits you. Sharp, foul, acidic. That is no mud. It is a medieval remedy. In this world, wounds were not treated with antiseptic or antibiotic. They were anointed, and the recipes for those anointments were often more terrifying than the injuries themselves. A typical mixture might contain pig fat, wine vinegar, crushed herbs, and most disturbingly, human or animal feces. It was believed that these ingredients had natural powers, that the rot could fight rot, that filth could somehow draw poison from the skin. The paste is thick and sticky. It is warm from sitting near a fire. It clings to your flesh as it is spread across the open sore. There is no warning, no explanation, just pressure and pain. The fellies arrive almost instantly, drawn to the new scent. They crawl across your limbs, land in your mouth, tickle your ears. You try to swat them away, but your arms are too weak. You ask what this paste is supposed to do. They say it keeps the wound moist so it does not dry out and crack. They say it protects against bad air, because in these times, disease was believed to come not from filth, but from miasma, from corrupted air that seeped into the body. A wound covered in filth was thought to be sealed from the even greater dangers that floated through the air. No one speaks of infection. They do not know the word. But they do know that some wounds rot faster than others, that some patients cry louder, that sometimes the wound begins to crawl. They call it God's punishment or the devil's breath. They do not see the bacteria. They see a spiritual imbalance. And so, the ointment is considered holy, sacred, applied with hands that are unwashed but prayerful. The nurses, often monks or women from religious orders, believe they are doing good. They are saving your soul by tending to your body, even if body fails. And you believe it too, because what else is there to believe in this place? The linen bandage is pressed down hard. Blood seeps through almost instant. You close your eyes and pray for numbness. You pray that the burning will ease, but it does not. The pain is constant. The ointment tingles at first, then bites. You feel something shift beneath your skin, or maybe it is only your imagination. Outside, someone screams. A patient 2 beds away has gone silent. A rat scurries across the floor near your feet. You turn your face toward the wall, away from the light, away from the smell, away from the truth, because deep down, you know, this is not healing. This is hope wrapped in ritual. This is faith forced into flesh. And when they leave, the bowl of ointment still sits on the table, dark and glossy, ready for the next wound, the next body, the next prayer. The fever begins quietly, a chill in your bones, a heat rising beneath your skin. You sweat even in the cold. Your breath quickens. Your vision blurs. But as night falls, something else takes over. The walls begin to move. Shadows stretch longer than they should. Faces appear where none should be. You are not just sick anymore. You are haunted. In the medieval hospital, fever was not only a physical state. It was a spiritual event. Patients burning with heat were often seen as possessed, not by disease, but by demons. The trembling, the muttering, the wide and empty eyes were not signs of infection. They were signs of a soul under siege. You thrash in your bed, trying to shake the visions. A dark figure stands at the foot of your straw mattress. You call out, but the voice that escapes your lips is not your own. The nurse crosses herself and runs to fetch a priest, not a physician, a priest, because now your body is no longer the concern. Your soul has taken center stage. The candles around your bed are lit one by one, not for light, but to push back the spirits of the air. Smoke curls above your head. Holy water is sprinkled over your chest. Prayers are whispered into your ears. Latin chants, spoken in rhythm, meant to drive out the presence that no one can see but everyone believes. You are held down as the priest places a cross against your forehead. He speaks louder now. The words no longer sound like comfort. They sound like war. A war being fought over your mind. You scream. You cry. Or maybe you laugh. No one is sure anymore. You are no longer seen as a patient. You are a battlefield. Sometimes they tie your arms with strips of linen. Sometimes they pour cold water over your head to drive the heat away. Sometimes they leave you alone in a dark room, believing silence might calm the chaos. But the fever doesn't listen to silence. It brings its own voices. They believe the devil enters through the senses, through touch, through sound, through thought. And so they block them one by one. Your hands are bound. Your ears are drowned in prayer. Your eyes are closed by force. Some survive. They wake up days later, weak but alive, not remembering what happened. Others never return. Their bodies cool as the candles burn low, and the staff whispers about the spirit that would not leave. In this place, healing the mind is not an act of care. It is a ritual of fear. The mad, the delirious, the trembling are all treated the same. They are restrained, isolated, drenched in prayer. There is no understanding of trauma or illness of the brain. Only sin, only darkness, only the need to cast something out. You lie there, your body trembling, your thoughts like smoke. You hear voices in the walls, or maybe just the creaking of wood. The candles flicker. The priest stands beside you, and still, no one brings water. No one brings medicine, only prayer. And so, in the thick air of this room, you realize something. It is not the fever that frightens them. It is the unknown, the invisible, the part of suffering that cannot be touched or explained. The demons they fear most are not outside the body. They are inside it. And tonight, they believe one of them lives inside you. The room is dim and close. The air feels thick with breath, with heat, with something you cannot name. You are told to lie down, but the bed is already full. 3 others lie there already, curled in pain, coughing, sweating through layers of wool and rough cloth. There is no choice. You lower yourself beside them, your body pressing into the damp straw, your skin touching theirs. This is the only space left. In the medieval hospital, beds were a luxury. Space was not granted based on illness, but on availability. You shared your bed with whomever was next in line. You shared your warmth, your breath, your suffering. Sometimes you shared your last moments. 1 bed, 4 bodies, 1 blanket if you were lucky. And no distance between the sick and the dying. You do not know who these people are. 1 mumbles prayers, 1 groans with every breath, 1 lies still. You hope they are asleep, but the truth presses against your side. They are cold, too cold. You close your eyes and try not to think about it. But the sound of coughing fills the space again. Deep, wet, hopeless. It rattles in the chest of the man beside you. You feel the droplets on your skin. There are no masks, no curtain, no isolation. Sickness is not contained. It moves freely, from mouth to air to skin to soul. And yet, there was a belief that sharing a bed could do good. That the strength of one patient might help another. That the energy could balance. That healing was contagious, not just illness. A dangerous hope that cost lives. The idea of quarantine had not yet taken hold. The plague, when it arrived, was a mystery, a curse, a divine punishment, not something that spread by touch or flea. So patients were gathered together, packed tightly into rooms that echoed with pain. Each body a furnace of disease, each breath a courier of death. You turn your head and see a rat run across the floor. It stops, sniffs the edge of the bed, then disappears beneath it. No one moves. Rats are common. They are not feared. But what they carry, silently, invisibly, is already in the air. Sometimes you wake in the middle of the night with someone else's arm across your chest. You cannot move. Their breath is heavy. Their fever is burning against your side. And you pray that whatever has taken them does not take you too. But prayer cannot stop what your body has already touched. The nurses do what they can. They change the straw when it turns black with blood or yellow with pus. They bring water, or what passes for it. They whisper words of comfort. But there is no room, no silence, no safety. The question becomes cruel in its simplicity. Would you rather die alone or die beside another? Is it better to feel the warmth of a stranger than to be left cold in an empty cell? The answer changes as the days pass, as the cough deepens, as the fever rises, as the bodies grow still. And so you lie there, surrounded, pressed between life and death, your eyes closed, your body still, your breath shallow, wondering which of you will go first, and if anyone will notice when you do. They say death has a sound, but in this place, it also has footsteps, soft, quick, skittering across the stones. You hear it at night when everything else is quiet. You open your eyes and see the outline of a rat slipping beneath your bed, its fur damp, its belly low to the ground. You do not scream. No one does. Rats are not visited. They are resident. In the medieval hospital, rats lived alongside the sick. They nested in corners under straw beds, behind firewood piles. They chewed through linen and stole crumbs from trays of untouched food. And they were not alone. They carried company. Fleas clinging to their skin, invisible to the eye but powerful enough to carry death from one bed to the next. The people here did not know what caused the plague. They did not suspect the flea. They did not see the danger in the small bite, the itch that followed, the black swelling that came days later. They spoke of sin, of punishment, of corrupted air, but never of the creatures beneath their feet. A patient would cough, spike a fever, and die within days. Another patient in the same room would soon follow. No one questioned why. It was simply the will of God, but the fleas had done their work, moving quietly from ankle to ankle, from wrist to wrist, from one weakened body to another. The smell of sickness did not drive the rats away. It invited them. Rotting bandages, crumbs of bread, bowls of old soup, the warmth of human skin. It was all here, ready for them, and no effort was made to remove them. Some believed rats were just another test of suffering, another burden to others believed they were drawn by the devil, a living symbol of the unclean. You watch one crawl over the leg of a patient who has not moved in hours. It sniffs the skin, then vanishes into the folds of the blanket. You want to cry out, but your voice feels stuck. Your throat burns, your arms are too weak, so you close your eyes and wait for it to pass, for the dance to continue. There are no traps, no poison, no strategy to fight the infestation, just more incense, more prayers, more whispers in the night. Some believe a saint will protect them, others pin charms to their beds, but the fleas do not care for holy symbols, they care only for blood, and still the belief remains that what kills is not the rat, not the flea, not the wound. It is the soul, the guilt, the judgment, that illness is born from sin, not filth. So the hospital remains unclean, the floor unswept, the beds unchanged, and the dance goes on. You scratch at your ankle. A small bump has formed. You do not remember being bitten, but it itches. It grows. You feel your skin burning from the inside, and you wonder if this is how it begins. If the rat that brushed past you yesterday brought something more than fear. You lie back down and pull the blanket over your chest. You feel movement near your feet. Another rat. Or maybe the same one. You try not to think about it. You try to sleep. Because in this place, sleep is the only escape from the crawling, from the biting, from the truth. And as the night deepens, the footsteps return. Soft, quick, constant. Death does not always come with a scream. Sometimes it walks quietly across the stone. There is a room at the end of the corridor, far from the main ward, where the crying never stops. Not from pain, not from fever, but from something deeper, something no one understands. Inside this room are patients who do not bleed, who do not cough, but who scream, whisper to shadows, tremble at nothing, or laugh when nothing is funny. These are not seen as sick in body. They are seen as sick in soul. In the medieval hospital, mental illness was not treated. It was contained. The confused, the depressed, the hallucinating were not given rest or comfort. They were feared, and fear led to control. So the first response was always the same: isolation, restraint, silence. You might be a man who has not spoken in weeks, or a woman who cannot stop crying. You might wake in the night and believe your thoughts are voices, or you might speak in a way that makes no sense to those around you. It does not matter. What matters is that you are no longer predictable. And in this place, unpredictability is dangerous. They tie your arms with cloth. If you resist, they tighten the knots. You are placed on a stone floor, or in a corner without a window. If you weep, they tell you to pray harder. If you scream, they pour cold water on your head. If you grow silent, they assume the demon inside you is resting. Some are chained, not with cruelty, they say, but with necessity, to keep them from harming others, to keep them from harming themselves. But the chains rust, the skin beneath them blisters, and no one checks how long they have been there. You are brought food in silence, a bowl of soup, a piece of bread, left at the edge of your reach. Sometimes you are forgotten for days. Sometimes you are remembered only when your voice disturbs the others. There is no concept of depression, no diagnosis of trauma, no understanding of epilepsy, of grief, of psychosis. These are not medical matters. They are spiritual. Your suffering is a punishment, a possession, a warning to others to remain pure, to stay faithful, to avoid whatever it is that you have become. The priest visits more often than the nurse. He brings holy water and scripture. He speaks words meant to drive out darkness. But the darkness does not leave. It clings to your skin. It echoes in your skull. And the more they pray, the louder it seems to grow. Some are beaten in secret, to scare the demon out. Others are left in silence, until their minds fracture beyond repair. And still, they are seen not as victims, but as warnings. And yet, sometimes, in the middle of the night, one of the nurses sits beside the door. She does not speak. She does not touch. But she listens. And for a moment, your voice is heard by someone who does not call it madness. For a moment, you are not invisible. But morning comes, and with it, more water, more ropes, more prayers. The room grows darker. The days stretch longer. The silence around you thickened. In this hospital, healing the mind is not seen as possible. Only suppression, only control, only survival. And so you remain in that room, alone with your thoughts, your chains, and your unseen wounds. Not because no one cares, but because no one knows how to see you. At dawn, when the first sliver of sunlight pierced through the narrow windows of the ward, some believed it brought healing. The rays, golden and silent, slid across the stone floors, touched the edges of beds, warmed cold feet, and for a brief moment, hope flickered. It was said that light, especially the morning light, came from God, that it could purify not only the air, but the soul. Some hospital wards were built to face the east, not for architecture or beauty, but for faith, to welcome the rising sun, to let its holy warmth fill the rooms of the suffering. Light was considered a medicine, a divine presence that chased away the darkness of illness. Where candles flickered weakly through the night, sunlight now poured in as something sacred. But not everything the light revealed was holy. As it moved across the beds, the light uncovered things that had been hidden by shadow. The raw edges of untreated wounds, the swelling of limbs filled with pus, the crawling of small white larvae inside dead tissue, the green tint of skin rotting slowly. The smell, once dulled by sleep, now filled the air again. Decay that had been invisible in the dark became undeniable in the light. You saw the truth in the faces of the others. The sun showed what had been ignored. A man with blackened fingers, trying to hide his hand beneath the blanket. A woman whose bandages had not been changed in days, crusted to her flesh. A child whose eyes stared blankly, the soul already gone. The light did not heal them. It exposed them. There was no place to turn, no curtain to close, no wall to separate the living from the dying. The sun shined on all alike, and in that light, reality settled in. This was not a place of recovery. It was a place of waiting. The morning light did not bring renewal. It marked the beginning of another day of survival. And still, they believed in its power. They placed patients near windows whenever possible. They opened shutters when the sky was clear. They whispered that the warmth would lift the spirits, that where there was light, there was still grace. But you, lying there, could feel the contradiction. The light did not cleanse you. It betrayed you. It made you visible. It made your pain undeniable. There was nowhere to hide your suffering, no way to soften the color of infection or the shape of death. It lit up the corners of the room where rats gathered. It revealed the bloodstains in the straw. It settled on your chest like a reminder that your time was running out. And as the sun rose higher, the illusion faded. The room returned to routine. Moans, whispers, silence. The nurses moved between beds with bowls and cloths. The priest muttered prayers over those who had not made it through the night. The candles were snuffed out one by one. You turned your face from the window. The light was too much, not because it blinded, but because it saw too clearly. And in this place, sometimes it was easier to remain in the dark. Long before medicine found its voice, healing belonged to the sacred. In the medieval hospital, the most powerful tools were not scalpels or herbs. They were relics, prayers, and promises whispered into the silence of pain. When the body failed, the soul became the battle, and the hope of healing rested not in science, but in the hands of saints. The sick were brought not just to be treated, they were brought to be blessed. A splinter of wood said to be from the cross of Christ, a bone fragment of a long-dead martyr, a cloth once worn by a holy virgin. These were not curiosities, they were medicine, held aloft by priests, pressed gently against open wounds, laid on the chests of the dying like seals of divine permission to survive. Pilgrims travelled great distances to reach hospitals known for housing sacred objects. Some walked for days, barefoot and starving, just to touch the glass case where a saint's relic lay. Not all came to be healed. Some came simply to be seen by God, to prove their faith through suffering, and maybe, just maybe, to be rewarded for it. Hospitals were often built beside churches, sometimes as extensions of monasteries. The line between spiritual care and physical care blurred completely. Monks served as caregivers. Prayer was the first and last treatment of the day. Holy oil was anointed on the forehead before surgery. Psalms were sung in the background while fevered patients moaned. Every gesture was part ritual, part medicine, part final farewell. Some patients made promises. They vowed to donate all they had to the church if they survived. They swore to change their lives, to walk in penance, to dedicate themselves fully to God. It was believed that the more sincere the vow, the more likely the miracle. But when the miracle did not come, it was never seen as failure. It was simply the will of heaven. A child with trembling limbs would be brought to a relic and asked to kiss it. A man near death would clutch a crucifix as the priest whispered Latin over his ear. And even when the breath stopped, the ritual continued. The soul had to be released properly. The room had to be cleansed with incense. The other patients had to be reminded that what they witnessed was not abandonment, but ascension. Faith brought comfort, and in many ways, that comfort became the cure. For those who lived, it was a sign of blessing. For those who died, it was an invitation to eternity. In either case, healing was believed to have happened, maybe not in the flesh, but somewhere deeper. And so the relics remained, polished, guarded, revered, not because they were proven to work, but because belief itself had power. The kind of power that made pain bearable, that gave meaning to suffering, that turned a dying breath into a holy offering. In the flickering light of the chapel beside the ward, candles burned without pause, each one lit for a soul in waiting, a soul in agony, a soul in transition. And as the smoke curled upward, so did every hope, every prayer, every sacred promise whispered by those who had nothing else to give. In the corner of the ward, a wooden bowl sits steaming, filled with something that barely resembles food. A watery broth with bits of root, maybe a piece of barley, maybe a sliver of meat if the kitchen was generous that day. You lift the spoon to your lips, and it drips more than it holds. But still, you eat. Because in this place, soup is not just a meal, it is medicine. In the medieval hospital, food was not designed to nourish the body. It was meant to calm the spirit. The diet was simple, repetitive, and always rooted in humility. Thin soup, stale bread, watered wine. No spices, no pleasure. Meals were delivered with silence, often by monks, and taken in silence, as if each bite were a form of repentance. You are weak. You have not eaten in days, and what lies before you is not enough. But you take it slowly, feeling the warmth slip down your throat, easing the ache in your stomach just enough to quiet the hunger. The bread is dry and crumbles before reaching your mouth. Still, it is bread, and it means you are still being cared for. Fasting was common, not always by choice. Some believed that starving the body purified the soul. That hunger brought one closer to holiness. Others simply had nothing more to give. Hospitals depended on donation. What was served to the patients was whatever had been left at the gate that morning. A gift from a farmer, a basket from a merchant's wife, leftovers from the monastery's table. There was no science behind the portion. A dying man might receive the same as a child with a scraped leg. A woman in labor might be given less, told to focus on prayer instead of food. The body was never the priority. The soul was. Yet, even this meager meal carried meaning. To eat was to live another day. To eat was to participate in the rhythm of the ward. Morning prayers, soup at noon, evening candles. In a place where control had been stripped from every part of life, food became a ritual of its own, a moment of certainty. Sometimes a nurse would offer her own portion to a patient she believed could still recover. Sometimes the soup was delivered with a hand briefly resting on a trembling shoulder, a gesture of human warmth, more nourishing than the food itself. You remember the taste, not because it was good, but because it was something. It grounded you. It reminded you that you were still here, that your body, no matter how broken, still craved the most basic comfort. And even if the soup could not cure the fever, even if the bread could not mend the wound, they gave you something to hold on to. Hope came in small wooden bowls. It came with the sound of spoons scraping the bottom, with the scent of boiled herbs, with the rhythm of chewing among the groans and prayers, and in a place so ruled by death that hope, however thin, was still enough to keep some alive. At some point, the fever stops rising. The wound no longer bleeds. The coughing softens. But it is not because you are getting better. It is because your body is giving up. And when that moment comes, no one rushes to save you. No instruments are brought. No medicines are prepared. Instead, a candle is lit beside your bed, and someone begins to whisper the last rites. In the medieval hospital, death was not a failure. It was an expected part of the process, a destination, not a defeat. For many who arrived here, the hospital was never a place of healing. It was the last room they would ever enter, a place to be made ready, not for life, but for what came after. You feel the change before anyone speaks it. Your breath is shorter. The voices around you become more distant. The warmth of your limbs begins to fade. And still, they do not panic. They come with calm hands, with oil and incense. A priest kneels beside you. He does not ask how you feel. He asks if your soul is prepared. The candle flickers. Its flame is steady, watching. Others in the ward grow quiet. They have seen this many times before. Death is not loud here. It does not announce itself. It sits gently, like a shadow behind the curtain, waiting. Sometimes family is called, if they can be found. Sometimes a nurse holds your hand, even if she does not know your name. You are not alone, but you are already leaving. The body remains, but the attention turns to your soul. Prayers are whispered in Latin. Holy water touches your forehead. The bed is surrounded by silence, then murmured ritual. There is a comforting, strange and soft. No effort to pull you back. No machines. No shouting. No disbelief. Just acceptance. A belief that this, too, is sacred. That letting go is as important as holding on. You are encouraged to speak, not about your pain, but about your sins, your regrets, your confessions, words that might unburden the spirit, even if the body has already surrendered. And if you cannot speak, the priest speaks for you. He carries your repentance like a bridge between here and what lies beyond. The testaments come next, not written with pen and paper, but spoken aloud. Who you are, what you leave behind. Sometimes nothing but a name and a memory. The nurse nods, the candle burns lower, and the room darkens around you. When the final breath comes, it is not met with gasps, it is met with prayer. The sheet is pulled over your face. The bed is left untouched for a moment, as if the soul still lingers. Then slowly, quietly, they prepare the space for the next. And so the hospital becomes a passage, a final hallway, a last resting place where healing was never promised, but dignity in death still mattered. You came here not for a cure, but for peace. And in that silence, beneath the weight of centuries of suffering, you are finally still. In the quiet corners of the medieval hospital, where light barely touches the walls and the air stands still, there is something you will not see. A mirror. Or if one is there, it is covered, draped with dark cloth, hidden behind wooden shutters, turned to face the wall. Not out of vanity, not to protect the weak, but out of fear. A deep, ancient fear of reflection. It was believed that when a person was close to death, their soul hovered near the surface, that it could be seen in the eyes, and worse, that it could be caught in a mirror, that the final breath, the last moment of life, could be frozen in glass, trapped in a silvered surface, left behind like a ghost staring back at whoever dared to look. Patients were never allowed to gaze at themselves during their final hours. To see one's own dying face was to meet death before it arrived, to invite it closer. And so the mirrors were hidden, covered in linen, removed entirely. Even small bowls of water, if reflective, were emptied and turned over. The soul had to leave freely, not confused by its own image. For those who cared for the dying, this superstition held weight. Eyes that once sparkled with life now reflected nothing, just fog, just loss. And in that reflection, they feared they might see their own end. Death was already a presence in every hallway. They did not wish to see it looking back at them through glass. There are stories of people who died suddenly after staring into mirrors too long. Stories of apparitions appearing in polished surfaces. Stories that turned into warnings. And in a place where death was constant, even a whisper of such things became ritual. You lie in your bed, cold creeping up your spine, and you wonder what you look like. You want to see your own face, to know what remains of you. But there is no mirror, only the eyes of the nurse, filled with pity, only the flame of the candle flickering, only the silence around you, holding its breath. And perhaps it is better this way, to not see what death is making of you, to not watch your skin pale or your lips crack, to not lock eyes with the shadow moving through your gaze. Some say that in the moment before death, the face becomes something else, something not entirely human, as if the body is already halfway gone. Those who witnessed such things kept their memories close. They did not speak of them often, but they always kept the mirrors covered. Even now, centuries later, the custom lingers in some places. A cloth placed over the glass after a loved one dies. A mirror turned to the wall in a room of mourning. A fear older than science, born not from logic, but from the deep, unspoken belief that the soul should never see itself leave. In the medieval hospital, reflection was a risk, and so the dying were surrounded by prayers, by candlelight, by silence, but never by their own image. The mirror remained covered, and the soul, unseen, slipped away into the night. The room grows quiet after a death. A candle is lit, a prayer is said, a sheet is drawn over the face, and then, almost without pause, the work begins. The blanket is folded neatly, the robe is removed, the shoes, if there were any, are taken from under the bed. Someone else will need them soon. In the medieval hospital, death did not end suffering, it only passed it on. There were too few linens, too few cloaks, too few bowls and belts and boots. So when a patient died, their belongings were not considered keepsakes. They were resources, objects with value in a place where value was scarce. A blanket soaked in sweat was still better than none. A cloak with holes could still hold warmth. Even bandages, if not to blood it, might be rinsed and reused. At first, it feels wrong. The idea of stripping the dead, of emptying their pockets before the body has... But it was routine. It was expected. And in many cases, it was done by those who knew the dead best. A fellow patient, a nurse, sometimes even a priest, eyes lowered, lips still moving in prayer. There was no malice in it, no cruelty, just survival. The hospital had no steady funding. Supplies came from charity, from local farms, from noble donations, and even then, they never lasted, so everything was used again. Clothing, bedding, even wooden cups. Death gave the living another day to endure. And yet, there were moments when the line blurred. A ring taken from a finger, a coin slipped from under a tongue before burial, a necklace hidden in the folds of a robe. Small things, meant to be buried with the body, vanished quietly. Some called it theft, others called it necessity. The staff learned to be quiet, to move quickly. The next patient was always waiting. The bed was still warm. The fear of touching what the dead had left behind faded with time. Hands that trembled at first grew calm. Eyes stopped looking away. The practice became a rhythm. Sometimes the family came later, looking for a keepsake, a book, a scarf, a simple item to remember the person they lost. And often, it was already gone, given to someone else, or sold to pay for candles and bread. The hospital did not keep relics. It consumed them. You lie on your bed, watching it happen across the room. A man who groaned beside you for days has fallen silent. The nurse removes his blanket, folds his cloak. You see it all, and you understand. Because you would want that same blanket when the chill sets in. You would want that same cloak if the wind blew through the stone walls. And maybe someone will want yours too. It is easy to call it theft from a distance, to judge what you do not have to do. But here, surrounded by suffering, everything changes. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is sacred except the breath still in your lungs. And when your turn comes, you will not care who takes your shoes. You will only hope that they make it one more night because of them. The hands that touch your wound are rough and tired. They carry the smell of old herbs, sweat, and something metallic. You notice the dirt under the fingernails, the dried blood along the fingers. You wonder if those same hands just closed the eyes of a corpse in the bed beside yours. You wonder if they were ever washed at all. In the medieval hospital, the idea of hygiene did not exist as we know it today. Cleanliness was not connected to health. It was connected to pride, and pride was a sin. Washing too often, caring too much for the body was seen as vanity, and vanity invited judgment. To be clean was to be suspect. To be humble was to remain in the dust. Physicians, monks, nurses, they all moved from patient to patient without soap, without water, without pause. The tools they used were wiped on cloth or apron, then used again. Bandages were touched, adjusted, replaced with the same hands that just held a dying man. No one questioned it. No one hesitated. Cleanliness was not part of the ritual. Water was scarce, often polluted. It was saved for drinking, not for washing. And even when available, it was used more for ceremony than sanitation. Holy water to anoint the forehead, a basin for the priest, a drop on the lips of the dying. But never a full hand scrub, never an intentional act to remove what might harm. Because they did not know. They did not see the connection between filth and fever, between touch and infection. They believed sickness came from the stars, from the air, from divine punishment. Not from hands, not from cloth, not from the bedpan left too close for too long. And so, the simple act of washing hands remained absent. Not just forgotten, but rejected. To spend time cleaning oneself was to show concern for the body over the soul. And the soul was all that mattered. The body was temporary, weak, a vessel of sin, destined to return to the earth. You feel it now, the warmth of another's touch. The pressure of fingers pressing a bandage against your skin. You do not protest. You are too weak. And even if you had the strength, what would you ask for? A bowl of water? A bar of soap? These are not part of the care here. They never have been. The irony is cruel, that what could have saved lives was seen as a luxury. That humility killed more than any wound. That the simplest defense against death was buried beneath layers of belief and fear. In the centuries to come, people would look back and marvel at the ignorance, at the loss, at how many lives were surrendered not to the sickness, but to the hands meant to heal it. But here, in this ward, with the candles burning low and the groans echoing softly through stone, no one speaks of such things. The hands remain unwashed. The cycle continues, and you close your eyes, hoping that what touches you now is mercy, not mistake.